All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel Labona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And today we are joined by longtime guest who is now, I think maybe this might inch you back above Ish, put you on in a tie with Ish, but returning to the show once again, longtime friend and a fan of the show, we've got Andy Chacon. Andy, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I am fantastic, and we are happy to have Andy on because we have got one of the most hotly debated and talked about movies of last year, not just in the horror genre, just movies in general. This is one that a lot of people are talking about. We're talking Smile from 2022. You can catch it now streaming on Amazon Prime and wherever else it may be. And this is a movie that kind of came out of nowhere and just took everybody by storm, for better or for worse. So in a section that we're calling Intake Session, I want us to start off with that obvious question. You've got something new here. You know, is this scary? Does it work as a movie for you? Did you enjoy it? Let's start with Andy.
I'm going to go with the obvious. I didn't know what the movie was from the inception to the ending. Almost, I had a hard time trying to identify: is this a psychological thriller? Is this a horror? Obviously, at the end, you could tell. Okay, they're going for the horror genre here, but
right.
But there was a good, and you know what? The first hour and some of the film, it had that feeling where you're watching this film and you're into it. Okay, this is psychological, man. You don't know what's going on. I mean,
right.
And then all of a sudden you get jump scares. You get, what the hell was that? You know? I mean, and so it was almost as if it wasn't necessary, you know? So if you're going for the psychological side of it, it was very good, but there were some things that were not necessary. And so it was confusing for me as I watched the film to like just to come to a clear conclusion until she wandered into the old broken down house that she grew up in. And
right.
At that point you're saying, oh, okay, you know, but it was a roller coaster ride of like, I don't know what to think, you know? And the other thing is that, and I gotta say it was done really well. But it really wasn't anything that I haven't seen before, you know? And that's sort of the sort of like the conclusion that I came to, despite the fact that the thing made more than $200 million at the box office, you know,
and they made it for basically peanuts.
Yeah, I read $17 million. It's like, wow. So Smiley too, you know?
All right. What about you, Dave?
So I do think that this movie is not original at all. I've seen this movie before,
right?
Because I've seen The Grudge, and I've seen Ring, and I kept thinking, you know, like every time the smile would come up, you know, it was like, oh, 7 days, you know, it's definitely not something new, it's not something unique, but here's the thing: how often do we find something that's new and unique anymore? Everything is pastiche. You know, it's taken from here and taken from here, and let's throw it together and create something that that when you boil it into this, you know, stew, does come out as something new. And I think that that's what this was. I think there was enough psychological thriller here to make the tired curse movie feel fresh.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what this was, because I did not care. Like, I was aware the entire time that I was watching this that it was not new and that it was not unique, and yet I didn't care.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm gonna, you know, hot take here. Even something like Evil Dead 2 is not really new and unique when it comes out, because it's basically just Three Stooges in a cabin in the woods.
Fair.
That's all it is, you know? And so when you stop and you start thinking about that, you know, it's like, well, like, did even Buster Keaton do anything new back in the 20s? You know, he had Harold Lloyd to thank. So there's all of this stuff that, you know, kind of runs through my mind when I start wanting to knock this movie. And I can't.
And I think, and I'm sorry, and I think that that's a valid point, to the sense that I feel the same exact way, but only because it was filmed and edited very well. You know?
And that's a major part of it.
Yeah.
For me, you know, it's how good a movie is this? Aside from, you know, okay, I've seen this thing before, you know, like how many war movies have I seen that it's basically the same fucking movie, and yet I don't care. Why? Because at the end, I'm still going rah rah USA, you know? You know, that's the feeling that I got here. You know, not rah rah go USA, but that was fucking awesome. That
but
moment
also,
was
yeah,
awesome.
rah rah go USA.
But
Where
also
else in
rah
the
rah go
world?
USA. Yeah, you know, exactly. And I will say this: I think that this is one of the scariest movies I've seen in a long, long time. And for that alone, this movie has my praise. And the director, what was his name? Parker Finn in his directorial debut, his feature film directorial debut. Like, wow, I cannot wait to see what else he puts out, because to make me afraid to go downstairs after the movie's done, which happened. I needed to come downstairs and get something, and I was like, I don't want to go. Do I really need it that bad?
I'm so happy to hear you say just that. I mean, everything you said was great, but like the end of that thing makes me so happy, because I'm 100% in that boat. We watch at least one horror movie a week to do this show. I usually watch one other one at some point. I watch scary movies all the time. And 9 out of 10 times I watch a scary movie and I go to bed and life is peachy. Last night, when I watched this movie, for the listener, there was a concern that I might fall asleep during the movie last night because it's had a long day and I might not make it today. So I finished this movie at about 12:30 on a school night.
Oh, wow.
And I still made myself sit on the couch and like, I sat on the couch and I put on some Bob's Burgers, because I was like, I need some brain
bleach. You need a palate
right
cleanser.
Now. Yeah, because if I close my eyes in the dark right now, something awful is going to happen. Like, that's just a given. I was terrified by this movie. So starting there, is it scary? God, yes. This movie was horrifying. It was just so scary. All that roller coaster that Andy talked about, that never lets you get comfortable with what it was. You could never settle into just trying to figure it out, because as soon as you focused hard, something screamed at you, or someone's head fell off, or there was a cat in a train box, right? I mean,
that was great.
Oh, so good. But you couldn't ever get into a like, you had to force yourself to not try to concentrate on the psychological aspect, because you were so scared that if you were looking really hard at the screen, something was going to come out and eat your face.
I couldn't be comfortable.
I could not either. I'm a note taker. When I watch movies for this show, I will usually fill 2/3 to a full page of notes, stuff I'm going to talk about and cross them. I have like 4 sentences and 2 of them are 2 words, right? Because I couldn't look away. I was intent on watching this movie and figuring out what this movie was, what the thing was, like what was happening to these people. And I was hellbent on trying to figure it out. And multiple times in this movie, I found myself concentrating so hard on what was going to happen next and where the next thing was going to pop up, that I was blindsided by something that was staring me right in the face. And that is something that I think is super impressive. Now talking about whether it's fresh, because that was one of the things people kept coming to me and talking about how fresh and original this movie was whenever somebody would watch it. And you're right, The Ring, The Grudge, those types of things. There's some heavy Asian influences there. But there was one particular movie that I'm not going to say this one rips off. I'm just going to say that it borrows heavily from. And it was an indie horror film that came out, I want to say it came out like 13, 14. It was called It Follows.
Oh, yes. This is very much like It Follows.
This is very much It Follows, where something attaches itself to you, and the only way to survive is to give it to someone else. Now, and if It Follows, you'd have sex with someone else, right? So that was at least exciting. In this, you've got to murder somebody, which I guess is a different kind of exciting.
Fucking over someone else
instead of fucking them. Yeah. And so that was the only thing, like as these 24 hours have passed, that I can think of to just kind of smash down on this movie is just the fact that I felt like it was very, very heavily influenced by, yes, a handful of things, but It Follows in particular. That being said, if you take a form, what do you always say, right? Like GoBots got tweaked by Transformers, right? Yeah. We all know Oreos. Oreos are the knockoff of Hydrox cookies, but they're better, right? So it's okay to take something that's out there and then make it better and make it your own thing and make it your thing. So I'm not upset with them, because It Follows, for as great as it was, dragged. That's not something that this movie did. It did not drag. Ever. And so I really think they took that and cranked that formula.
There was a film that came out in 2018 that was sort of like in the vein of Final Destination that was called Truth or Dare.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, where as soon as they didn't go through with the dare, they threw on a smiley face and they basically beefed it and died, you know, in many different ways. It wasn't a great film, but when I was thinking about this, I really hope that it goes in a whole different. I had no idea what this film was. I thought perhaps maybe it was a virus zombie movie that caused a smile. I was
waiting for a virus the whole time.
Right. So, and there were other things. See, I think that there's a difference between stealing and borrowing to pay homage to a director, which he does several times. There was a scene, and I watched it because you guys covered Terrifier. There was a scene in Terrifier that for some reason I just remembered, where there was the same scene in this film where there's a shadowy figure, like a blurry figure, walking towards a car window.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that. And I'm there going, wait a second, this is just like, oh, but it's better, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
you know,
my God, what a good one too.
So there are a lot of things, like, for example, the same way that Flanagan and Dr. Sleep, and he does things that pays, you know, homage to Kubrick, and you see sort of the same thing that he does with the over the top film, you know, how he like shoots down, sort of, but it's not stealing, it's just borrowing. Right. You know, and that to me was extremely important. And that's one of the reasons why I like this movie, because there's some directors that straight up just steal stuff and just try to pass it off on their own. But he doesn't do that. He does not do that. And what he does is he takes this and he makes it unique, you know? So despite the fact that it is something that I've seen before, you know, even at the very end, when you see the CGI and all that stuff, had a little bit of a hard time with it, but then you got to see how the person is in the final stages and then fully becomes cursed, and you're going, whoa, that's something James Wan didn't do, you know? And you say to yourself, that is freaking awesome. And then, because you've seen the people turn in the film, but you don't see what they're seeing, you know?
Yes. Right.
And that's what made that ending awesome, you know, to me, you know. So I think that with all of these different attributes from here or there, I mean, because obviously it is like you're mentioning it, like The Grudge and The Ring, but it goes into its own vein. It has its own uniqueness to it, and although I struggled with it, I'm sort of just like, you know, just made me say, you know what, I'll watch this again, despite because I know what it is,
Right.
and I'll enjoy it now more because I know what it is, So
Well, we're kind of getting into story, right?
sorry.
No, and that's perfect because that's
baby.
That's
Let's
a perfect segue to our next topic, which we're going to call "How does that make you feel?" And so, Andy, you just spoke a little bit about story, so I'm going to throw it to Daniel. But the question is to both of you: does the story work? You mentioned that it was very complex, a little hard to follow sometimes, and maybe not even knowing what exactly it is, but is it effective? Is the story itself scary, or is it things like jump scares that are scary? And did it work for you?
So I think that when you look at the story of this movie, you can kind of break it into a couple different parts as to determine whether or not it works or not. I think one of those parts that you need to look at is the fact that we were never put into the position of the omniscient viewer in this movie. We were never given any more information than Sosie Bacon had. And so we were experiencing this with her. If we were learning something, it's because she was living it. And that can be a tough way to make a movie. And that can be something that is very confusing. But in a situation like this, that made the movie. I thought that made the story really good. Yeah. There was one moment of exposition in this entire film, and it happened. Or it was a combination of like two moments. There was the cop explaining that this went back 20 people, and then meeting the guy in the prison. But even then, they never gave us some lesson about some ancient Danish witch doctor that created this or something, or Brazilian. It was Brazil is where he said he found it before, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't try to feed us a bunch of their headcanon on where this started. It was just like, yeah, nobody fucking knows, right? It's wild. And they let us live in that mystery and that oddness that surrounded this from the same perspective that she was living it. And that was really, really cool. I did like that element of the story. I think that another part of the story is the fact that just made it incredible, that made it so scary, is they establish very early on that nothing, it's a lot like when we did Oculus, nothing you see can be trusted. Why? Because we're seeing the world through. I keep calling her Sosie Bacon. What was her? I know she has a
Rose.
Rose. There we go. Because we're living this with Rose, and if she can't trust anything she sees, why should we as the viewer get to trust what we see?
Right.
There are some incredible things we see. We see the train go in the box. We see her wrap the box. Why would we believe for a second that what was it, Biscuit? The
Biscuit.
The cat mustache.
There we go.
Which I'm sorry, that is like one of the worst names for any animal in any movie ever. I mean, I'm sure there's a dog running around named Eyebrow. I mean, it's
Hey, I'll have you know, I had a pet rabbit when I was roughly 7 or 8 years old that I named Mustache.
Did he have the Charlie Chaplin Hitler?
Old.
Well, yeah.
Did he have the Charlie Chaplin? Is that why?
He had the Charlie Chaplin, yeah. And I didn't want to call him Adolf. So,
exactly.
So it was.
It's just like it's like naming a black cat with white feet socks, right? So,
right. You have to.
You just got to. So but for any stretch of the imagination until 2.5 seconds after he opens the box, when you all suddenly have the realization at the same time as her, why would you assume that something awful is going to happen there?
Right.
We got to live that, and that fragmentation of reality through film added to the fact that you just spent I ever since we ever mentioned on this podcast that everybody's like, Sinister is so scary because people watch heart rates. When I'm watching a movie and I'm genuinely feeling scared, I'd keep an eye on my heart rate on my watch. Resting heart rate low 60s. I stayed in the 90s for like this whole movie. Like I just never relaxed.
Yeah.
And all of those little things that I think and the cherry on top being getting the happy ending. And then finding out that the thing is still just fucking with her, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's so good because you finally, they lead you to this moment where you think you can, they convince you that now you can believe what you see, just to absolutely rip your heart out of your chest. And that those two things, the fragmentation of all of that and the complete lack of knowledge that we had as the viewer, I think led to a story that, did it make a whole bunch of sense? No. Did it make absolutely the amount of sense that it had to, no more, no less? 100%.
Andy?
I want to say that you mentioned something that was absolutely true for me. I got a stronger grasp of the film, and probably my favorite part of the film is when they were in Altoona in that prison, and she mentions that it was, I'm talking about myself, and that guy goes absolutely ballistic.
Oh yeah, went ape shit.
It was
on
a
her.
scary moment.
Yes.
It was, and just his reaction makes you understand that this is much worse than what you understand it to be. And then the explanation of what it is that you have to do in order to get rid of it. And you could tell that that guy went through hell and back to get rid of it, so much so that he ended up in prison. And if you notice, she almost went through it too. But at the end of the day, it was one of those psychotic hallucinations that just led her back to like right in front of the house. And you're saying to yourself, oh, wow, so she's not going through with it.
Right.
You know, it was those twists that made the story even better. But for me, that moment in that prison just made me say, okay, I'm heavily in now, because if this guy believes that, if this guy knows how horrible this thing is, then I want to see how horrible this thing is.
Yes.
You know? And so that's what got me to just stay on, and more, I got more into it at that point, because up to that point it was just questions and questions and wondering, and and you just didn't know. But it was sort of like it culminated to that point. Everything grew to that point. It felt like it was like a rising action. It just kept on building and building and building and building until the guy went nuts.
Yeah.
And then you say to yourself, okay, dude, I'm strapping on. I'm going to ride this one all the way home, because now you got me. Now you have me. It's an amazing story. It is an absolutely amazing story because of that. That sometimes in films, small part, you're not saying there are no small parts, only small actors. Yeah. That guy had a small part, but he played it to the fucking T, and he made me. It's because of him. It was because of him that the story just kept on moving on in an awesome direction. Despite me saying that I've seen this all before, there's originality in that. There was originality in the acting. There's originality in all of that. And she, at that point, is still saying, dude, what the hell? I mean, you're leaving me, and I'm pretty much all alone again. And I feel sorry for the cop, though, because every time the guy would help him out, she would say, so you want to have a conversation about that? No, I want to talk to you. I'll figure it out on my own. It's like, dude, and at the end, poor guy, but whatever.
Yeah, he's a great actor. He's been in all those
he's in all the Defenders shows.
The Defender shows, yeah, the Daredevil and Punisher and all that. I think he's also in Stranger Things. He's one of the
he is. You're right.
Not
he's
the
one
sheriff,
of the police
but
officers.
the deputies. He's one of the deputies. Yep. So he's one of those guys that like he's been on in your awareness for a while. So it's nice to see him get like a real solid piece of acting.
Right. And even if it was just for like what, 2-3 minutes?
Yeah, but what a 2 or 3
I'm
minutes.
telling you, man.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
And I absolutely love the story. For me, aside from how scary this movie is, the story I think was my second favorite aspect of this movie. And it has to do, I think it has to do with the ending. And I couldn't decide whether I liked the ending right away. So I'm kind of glad that I screwed up last week. Last week, I texted Daniel about 10 minutes into Smile. And I said, hey, we're doing Smile this week, right? And he said, well, nope, we're doing Leprechaun because it's St. Patty's Day. And I was like, I guess I'm watching Leprechaun tomorrow because I was already balls deep into Smile and I was not about to turn it off. So I've had about a week to think about this. I've had 8 days to think about this. I didn't know how I felt about that ending because as this is an exploration of trauma and what trauma does to you as a person, right, to your psyche, I thought it was a rather bleak ending.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, what is Finn trying to say here with this movie? Like, is he trying to say that whether or not you deal with your trauma, you're fucked? And I thought about that for a while. And I thought, well, it's honest if it's what he truly believes.
Hey, for this Trekkie fan, resistance is futile.
Right. Yeah. So I started thinking, I'm like, man, there's a lot of people in this world that have tried to deal with trauma and it's really difficult.
Yeah.
You know? And then I started thinking about it a little more. And I don't think that that's why that ending is so bleak. I think the ending is so bleak because we see a number of people here not deal with their trauma and attempt to deal with trauma by way of deflecting.
Yeah, by dealing with other people's trauma because it's easier.
Right. So it starts at the very beginning with her, right? We see her force others as a therapist. She's not a good therapist. We see her force others to ignore their trauma. She tells them, and she says the same thing to 2 different people with very different problems. She tells them the same thing. She says, I know it feels like this right now, but you need to work through this. And you can't speak to 2 people who are suffering from 2 totally different psychological situations in exactly the same way. We are not psychologists, but we are teachers. Yeah. And so, we do kind of have to play psychologists sometimes. I don't deal with all students in exactly the same way. And I would hope that a therapist doesn't deal with their patients in exactly the same way because they have a lot more training than I do. Right. So we see how that ends up for both of these people. Right. But then we also see her sister. That's the next person that I think we see that doesn't deal with their trauma. And she's living this fake life where it's all PTA meetings and, and rose bushes and
wine at birthday parties.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I love that shit. I love it. All right. I'm a bougie motherfucker.
I deal with most of my shit.
Yeah. My kid goes to my kid goes to a private school. I go to those kind of parties, those birthday parties where you show up there and it's like, hey, do you want something from this microbrewery or would you like something that grew off of this vine over here? And it's like, yeah. To both. Just yes. Right. So I get that.
I've got the 2 hands.
But if you're using that as a way to not be yourself and to not face what happened to you, because in fact you ran away from it from the beginning, you have a lot of stuff that you've got to work through, right? And you're the last person that should be coming up to your younger sister who you abandoned and saying you got to deal with your shit. You don't have your life together, right? We see the next guy, which is Rob Morgan as Tally, right? He didn't deal with it either. And he claims, I beat it. I did what I had to do, but he didn't. He made it someone else's problem. And subsequently, he's living in his own prison.
Yeah.
He's not living. He's in prison. Right. He's physically imprisoned in the same way that we are all psychologically imprisoned by our own jail cells that we build to protect ourselves from the things that hurt us, from the things that harm us, whether it's having fancy schmancy birthday parties for kids that neither care nor want them, or it's physically sitting in a jail cell. Right. And then we have Rose, Dr. Carter. Right. And we think that she's dealing with her trauma, but she's not. It is a very surface level attempt to get rid of a symptom and not get rid of the actual issue. What she wants is to get rid of the shit that is making her feel bad. But she doesn't want to get rid of the thing that's making her feel bad.
Right.
You know, it's like the person who's constantly saying, I don't know why bad shit is constantly happening to me, as they, you know, down, you know, their fourth or fifth pint of Guinness. You know, like, well, my friend, I can tell you why. You got to fucking cut that shit out.
Yeah.
Right. You know, if you've got an issue, don't start looking at the problems that come about because of that issue and say, but I don't understand. And that's exactly what happens with her. She never truly faces her demons. She faces the problems that come about because of the demon.
Right. It's very reactionary about it.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely reactionary. And if she was any good as a psychologist, she'd know that you got to get to the core of the issue.
I mean,
right? And she's not even a good patient either, because when she goes to her psychologist, she's like, you never dealt with this stuff. Like, they tell us exactly what the issue is right there.
Yeah.
It's like, you never dealt with this. You want medication, right? And that's the thing. Like, she wants to be medicated to forget.
Yes.
She doesn't want to be medicated to get better.
Yeah, she immediately just assumes like, oh, well, I know a doctor. You know, I'm a doctor. I know doctors. I know what medicine to ask for. That's what's going to work, and blah blah blah. You know.
No, I think when you're watching it, when she sees this guy's reaction, you would think that despite the fact that he got rid of the trauma, he's still dealing with it, and yet she doesn't catch on that. You know, and she just takes the tangible route to try to get rid of it, and that doesn't work, you know. So
we hear so often that, like, you can't love someone unless you love yourself. You can't help someone unless you have helped yourself,
right?
And I think we see that so often, people so willing to give advice, and it's like, my man, have you looked at your fucking life? You giving me advice? Like, listen, my life's fucking on fire. And not in the good way. Like, it's fucking burning back here, and I'm sitting here like the dog with the mug. Like, you know, this is fine. You know, I get that, but fucking handle your shit before you come and start telling me what the fuck to do.
And I like this side. You're talking as the story progresses, and you're talking about just finding out step after step of the fact that she's not good at her job. Like. The medicine that she asked for, didn't she ask for risperidone when she went to that?
Yeah.
When she went to the, that is like a hardcore antipsychotic. Like that is a you are a schizophrenic, and this is now your life. And she just walked by. Like,
you never get off that.
Yeah, and she just walks up like she's just gonna hand her a week's worth so she can just get some sleep. That's crazy. Like that right there.
Did she really think that her doctor was just gonna look at her and be like, oh, you want this incredibly powerful antipsychotic?
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, like, and so then you start to backtrack through that, and you're like, wow, how often does she meet somebody and she's like, oh, you see things? Here's medicine you have to stay on for the rest of your life now. Peace. Like,
you know, it sort of makes me sad to consider that conversation. What's the name of Kumar? What's his name? What's his real name?
Kal Penn.
There you go, Kal Penn. I mean, there's a conversation where he tells her, take a week off. You've been working 80-hour weeks. I mean, apparently he doesn't realize that she's a bad shrink too, because she's been working 80-hour weeks, you know? So that doesn't make any freaking sense to me either. But you start to think, man, how much damage she's caused, you know, in those 80 hours, man.
Yeah. That's a lot of people to see in working 80-hour weeks.
And we only saw two of them. One of which
was a repeat patient.
Exactly. And the other ones just off themselves the first time she saw them. I mean,
immediately.
Yeah.
Now, did either of you see Laura Hasn't Slept?
I did not. Like, as I was researching this today, I read about Laura Hasn't Slept, but I didn't realize that was like a short film that this was based on.
But I don't know where to find it. I was actually considering it.
So I bought the movie, and it came as an extra, as a special feature. So I'm not sure if you can access that through Amazon Prime.
Yes, Amazon Prime.
Yeah, you stick your baby in it, and then Amazon will send you all the things that the baby needs. order your Amazon Prime today. On Amazon Prime, I don't know if you can access that sort of stuff. I know that occasionally through streaming services, they do give you access to that.
Right.
But I think it's usually when it's like their original content.
Yeah.
But really interesting. I think it's on YouTube. I don't think it's particularly good.
Okay.
To be honest. But you can see where the beginnings of this movie are. And Laura is played by the same girl that plays Laura at the beginning of this movie, who offs herself with the with the clay from the plant. It's that scene is kind of a redone version of the entire film of Laura Hasn't Slept, because it's about 7 or 8 minutes long.
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting because the smile monster, that entity, makes an appearance in the movie, and that is the thing that she believes that is haunting her, that the reason why she can't sleep. So it's really interesting to see how the movie evolved from that idea to what we got in that opening scene, in that room. And I much prefer the full-length version.
Well, all right.
Particularly good, I think.
So we've spent our time now just crapping on Rose as a therapist, but there are other people that we need to look at. So in a section we're calling up therapists and patients. I mean, let's look at this cast, because there's a lot of faces in this movie, but there's only a handful of people that make an impact on what's happening here. So for better or worse, good or bad, I mean, who stands out in this movie for you, Dave?
There's a couple of people, actually. I think the acting was particularly good. Rob Morgan, although he's really only in one scene, fuck, what a scene. And we already talked about that, but I kind of wanted to throw that out there again. Like, he's really fucking good. Someone who I really like every time I see her, which is not often, but often enough for me to say, oh, that's her, is Robin Weigert, who played Dr. Northrup. She, I thought, was really great.
It's the chick from Deadwood, right?
The chick from Deadwood. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I was like, oh, from Deadwood. And she was really great. And that scene where she gets the phone call from the actual Dr. Northrup while she's talking to her was one of those where, like, you talk about, like, you see the train go in the box, you see it be wrapped. Why would you think that the cat is in there, right? We see her in the house. We assume that, like, the boyfriend let her in. We never once think that is the entity. Mm-hmm. And yet when she hears her voice on the phone, like, and the thing is, like, I always realized it, as I'm sure you guys did, just before she did. Right. So it's like the phone rings and I'm like, fuck, it's gonna be the doctor in there.
Yeah, did the same thing. It was. It's like as soon as he was opening the present, I was like, oh no,
the cat's in the box,
mustache.
and so, like, but is it actually her? Those, like, maybe 4 or 5 seconds that, like, your heart is in your throat and it's racing in your throat, and it's such an exhilarating fright that's happening at that moment, and the way that the smile just comes across her face, it was really really good. So a small role, but I think a really really powerful one. And then the other one I'll mention is Caitlin Stassi as Laura Weaver at the beginning of the movie. She did a really great job of playing someone who knew she wasn't crazy, but was crazy.
Yeah.
It's and I have unfortunately had to visit people at behavioral units in hospitals where you see all sorts of stuff, and that's what you see. You see a lot of people who truly believe that what is happening to them is real, who truly and it is real to them, right? But the sort of delusion that's going on there, like, it's sad. and it's frightening at the same time. It's absolutely scary to be in one of those places, even if only for a handful of minutes where you're not really experiencing it. So I can't imagine what it's like for someone like Dr. Cotter, right? Or someone like Weaver, who's a PhD candidate, you know, who's working in that field, you know. So I think she did a really great job of not just playing someone who was nuts, because it's easy to play crazy, right? At least I think it is. You know, you go over the top, but that's not what she did. She played it really subtle. There's a lot of like tiny little nuances to her performance that really sold it.
And it was so solid the way that she presented herself in that, where she started off and she was so skittish and she was up against the wall, and then when she finally comes to, like, she has that moment of clarity, you know, where she's saying, look, I know I sound crazy, but I'm not crazy. I'm a PhD candidate. I do this, I do that. Like, all of these things in my life are right. But there's this one thing, and I need you to believe that it's real. And just that, there was an intensity to that, where she went from skittish, scared to, like I said, it just, I mean, clear as,
I need you to believe me.
Yeah, clear as that Gulf Coast water, right? Like, you knew she was seeing through everything right there. And that was her moment to cut through the noise. And you know, all those times that Rose attempted to explain what was wrong, she was never able to cut through in a way that made her seem not crazy. But at the beginning, Caitlin Stussie's character, in that moment, it was easy to believe that she was being haunted by something, because she found a center to come from that was really good. And that was one of the problems that Rose always had. She was never able to find that space to where you believed that she was being sane in what she was saying. I believed Laura when she said that. When she said this is real, I was like, okay, somebody needs to listen to her, because now she's clear-headed, and we don't know how long it's going to last. So for the next X number of minutes, we need to pay attention to everything she says. And she played that so perfectly. I agree with that one. That one was
she is the reason I really truly believe that she and Parker Finn are the only two reasons why we have this movie at all. Because although Parker Finn wrote and directed, and I really do think that he's a very, very competent director.
Right.
He's great behind a camera, but like, she's the one that's great in front of the camera, and she's the one who made Laura Hasn't Slept the success that it was, and the reason why at South by Southwest everyone was like, well, we got to fucking see like a full-length version of this.
That Carpenter Russell magic.
I want to continue with Caitlin. So when you're watching the beginning of the film and you see her acting the way that she is, imagination comes into play. I mean, when you're talking about a psychological thriller, you don't necessarily need to see what they see in order to understand what they're going through if they're doing a good job, and then you'll believe it. But then you watch the end of the film, and then you see Rose going through the same thing. Then I close my eyes and I go back to that first scene, and I put the entity in that room, and my imagination puts another character in that one scene, and I realize why it is that she's acting the way that she is.
Right.
Because she comes to the culmination of that smile. So you know at the end of the film what it is that she went through, you know, and that to me was just amazing, because she's acting against nothing. She's acting against nothing, but we see what she's acting against at the end of the film, you know, and that to me was absolutely amazing. And I'm just gonna throw this again. I mean, to me the nitrous in the film is Rob Morgan. That is for me what pushes the film to the point of where the direction that it needs to go. That small role just pushes it in the direction that it needs to go. It was like nitrous. It was like nitrous. It was boom, and that small part to me was absolutely amazing. And obviously, I don't know much about Susie Bacon. I don't know what else she's done, honestly. But I gotta say, has to be her first big role, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm not 100% sure. Like
I mean, the only things that I've seen her in are the commercials that she does with her dad, and,
right?
And that's it.
She was in 13 Reasons Why.
Okay.
Mayor of Easttown.
I mean, but these are things that are
they're all small things. Yeah, absolutely.
So to me, you need someone to carry the story from inception to ending, and she does it so well, that it's sort of like I hitch myself to this and to this train, and it's taken me the entire way, and it's a good ride. So as far as her character carrying the film, she does a phenomenal job, an absolutely phenomenal job.
She does that really good job of portraying what for so often in the horror movie, somebody is sane 1 minute and then completely insane the next, right? And you take your, any Dark Castle film, you go back through any of these things, there's always this idea that insanity just comes on you that quickly. What we get out of her is somebody that we know is very intelligent. We know has a very good insight into how the human brain works. And so we get to watch that slow decline, which is a great performance from her. It also just cracks me up how you'll be looking at her, and at very first blush when this movie started, I was like, is that Hilary Swank? Right, like that was the very first thing I thought.
I honestly thought that it was a reincarnation of Ali Sheedy for some reason. I don't know why.
Then it's like,
both those are right. It's weird.
Then it's like, okay, so it's Susie Bacon, and then she smiles, and it's like, oh yeah, that's Kyra Sedgwick's daughter. Like right there.
Right.
Yes.
Like it's all right in here. Like as soon as she starts moving her mouth, it's like that is definitely Kyra Sedgwick's daughter. So I think that she did a really great job. I did enjoy what she brought to the film. There's an actor in this film, and he didn't do anything spectacular in it, but this is just a guy that I have loved for basically his entire career. Kyle Gallner as Joel, the ex-boyfriend cop. He didn't do anything spectacular. Just shout out to Kyle Gallner. I've loved the guy since he played Bart Allen on Smallville.
Yeah.
He was a perfect Bart Allen on Smallville, and the guy has been out here just cranking out low budget horror films. Like if you go look up his IMDb or his wiki or whatever, in the past, like dude dropped 3, counting this one, he was in 3 horror films released last year. He was in Scream, he was in The Roost, and he was in this. And in the years leading up to that, it's like he's got the look for something dark. So it's like dark comedy, horror film, dark comedy, horror film. Like that's his
Jennifer's Body, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, like it's just that's the guy's whole MO. But I love it. I think that he played it exactly how he had to play it. You could tell that, there was that. Again, not being spoon-fed things. It's like, okay, obviously there was a relationship there, kind of fell apart. He's not over it. Cool. And he played all of that very well down to the very end when we got the him that wasn't him. And he played through that moment perfectly. So that was one that just made my heart happy. I love seeing this guy in films. He's always a lot of fun to watch. A-Train from The Boys as Trevor.
Yeah.
Sure. It was kind of fun to see him not be A-Train. But I think that when it comes down to it, you can't really put the weight of this movie being good or bad on anybody but Rose, Susie Bacon. I mean, she dominated this role. She just so many little things that she did when she goes to visit Joel the first time. And right before she knocks on the door, she realizes the bandages from when she fell through the coffee table are showing. And she kind of has a moment of panic where she tries to pull that sleeve up to hide that from him. And that moment when after we see that Mustache was in the box and she's standing in the room just losing her mind, because it is beyond her how she can see something that no one else can, and that it is just ruining her life, which as we found out from her boss, from Cal Penn, you know, she's working 80-hour weeks. Obviously, the idea of perfecting mental health is something that has destroyed her own over all of these years. And so now it's happening to her. And there was a desperation and a helplessness in everything that she portrayed on screen, that all of that shined through. That idea of, like Dave said, not willing to, not accepting that you can't help others without helping yourself. You know, she medicate me so I can get back to my life. But then, and like I said, you just hope that that's not her MO when she's treating people. But she views herself, right? It might be. But there's also that idea that she just views herself as not one of those people, right? I'm not crazy. This is just, I'm just what, she, you know, she's got all the medical terms. It's like, oh, these are echoes of the symptoms of my patients. And, you know, she's throwing out all the right buzzwords. And you're just going, it's not just that she doesn't want to accept this is happening because it's cuckoo bananas, right? She doesn't want to accept this is happening because if she does, then what puts her in a position of power to help these other people? If she becomes one of these people who's having psychotic breaks and who's losing touch with reality, then where does she get any right to help these people who come to her, who she has based everything she does her life around? She's skipping nephews' birthday parties to work Saturdays. Obviously, everything she does revolves around the fact that she's trying to help these people. And if she's one of these people, then her entire identity is lost. And there's nothing left of her. And the performance that Sosie Bacon put on screen to show all of that, because again, going back to story, going back to the way all of this was directed, nothing was spoon-fed to us in this movie. And yet, I wasn't left with any questions, except for the one at the end where you're going, well, shit, what happens to Joel now? Right? And that's the one that we're supposed to be left with. At no point was I sitting around going, wait a minute, like, here's A, here's B. We got you there. Love it or hate it. And she took all of that and took what was a paper thin plan for a character and brought it to life in just absolutely miraculous ways. So hang on just a second. We got a comment coming in here from Greg MB. Says it's his first time catching the podcast live. Really appreciate what you guys are doing. I have a list of movies you need to see now. You can find us on Instagram at ShiverPod, or you can shoot that list to us at shiverpod@gmail.com. Greg, we'd love to see it. We'll just send it back with checks next to the ones we've seen already.
Yeah. But there's a lot. I'm always surprised by the movies we haven't done on the show yet.
I am too. Like Dave and I have this Dave and I have this conversation all the time.
Have you guys done Dead Ringers?
No,
I haven't seen Dead Ringers.
No, in fact, we haven't done any Cronenberg.
No, we haven't.
Oh wow!
I've been dying to do Videodrome.
Videodrome is awesome.
I was going to say Cronenberg and Lynch are two big holes in stuff that we've done so far. So so Greg, shoot that list to us, man. We'd love to see it.
Yeah. Definitely would. Thanks for catching us live. So we've got really only two things to talk about, and they're kind of linked together. So in a section that we're calling deliberately derivative, I want to talk about the kind of horror that's in this movie. Andy, you mentioned at the beginning of the show that you couldn't tell whether the movie wanted to be a psychological thriller or it wanted to be a horror movie. And you kind of decided towards the end of the movie. But was there anything that worked for you as far as the horror goes? Do you think that sort of identity crisis works in a movie where people are working through psychological issues? Is that a statement? Am I reaching? I don't know.
I think that there's one thing that I did mention before, and when she's going through her issue where she thinks she's in the middle of a situation, but then as soon as that situation comes to a T, she's she's like in her car or somewhere else. I mean, that was absolutely necessary, but there are a couple of jump scares in the film that I don't think were necessary, because to me, that's not what this movie is. Um, but like, for example, the cat in the box, absolutely necessary. That
Right.
needed to happen. You know, where's mustache? Where's mustache? There's mustache. All right. You saw the train. Okay. That needed to happen. But the scene at the very beginning where she's sitting there and then there's this dark figure, you know, just comes out of nowhere, and that's a jump scare. It seems like it was put there just for the sake of getting that scare. I mean, and although it did affect me, it did its job. I don't think that it was necessary.
I'd also like to point out that one of the things I will knock this movie for is that I think was the best jump scare, and they put it in the trailer, and I was kind of disappointed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I don't watch a lot of trailers, but this one, just because I had no
From the
idea
very
what it
first
was,
trailer,
but the
it was
very first trailer
in there.
had that moment in there, and so
maybe that was just a way to like market the film. Okay,
maybe because as soon as she had those headphones on, I was like, ah, shit, when's it going to happen? Yes, it still got me, but I knew a jump scare was coming because I'd seen the scene with her on the headphones, and I'd seen, I think it was her mom. It was the mom's face that popped up and said her name and scared her right there.
For me, it was the one in the car, you know, where the sister's neck kind of swings down, you know. And it's a great moment. But the moment she was in her car, I was like, oh, this is gonna happen now.
Right.
I don't even know. In hindsight, I 100% should have known that was coming before the moment that like before the moment right before it happens, when you realize that you can only see the sister from here down,
right?
You realize that's going to happen, and then it got me. But like, it's still like that's one where in hindsight I'm like, how did I not see that one coming? Like the blurry figure coming.
They set it up so
they set it up so beautifully, and I don't know what I was focused on, like what I was waiting to happen, but that wasn't it, Chief, because we've talked about this on the show before.
Next stuff,
next stuff, just broken bone stuff just gets me. Like, I will Terrifier, throw salt in the wound, punch the mashed potatoes in the face hole, and I'm like, yeah. Right. As soon as you start breaking bones or bending body parts in the wrong direction, like my stomach just jumps all the way up into here. Like, oh.
So I think okay. So I struggled up to a certain point of the film trying to figure out what it was, but sitting here and thinking about this, perhaps maybe this is, I'm not going to say perfect, but I'm going to say that this is a very strong attempt of a marriage between a psychological thriller and a horror.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm with you.
You know, so that's where I'm at with the film, you know, but I think that I want to watch it again because I'll appreciate it more knowing what I went through. You know, I'll appreciate the film for the story. I know what's going to happen, but when you're on that trip and you don't know where you're going and you're afraid you're going to be, you know, thrown down some path that, oh man, I don't want to go down that path. I'm going to waste my time watching this. But now that I've seen it, it is a journey that I'm willing to take a second time. I need to watch this movie a second time. You know?
I agree. When I look at an identity to slap onto this movie, right? And you're trying to think of just kind of what it is, like, what was it trying to be? And I think that it just, in my head, this movie just wanted to be, it just wanted to be scary. Right. And I think that that's why we get the jump scares, intense scenes. I think that's why we get the things that are almost throwaway, make you question your sanity scares. The very first time she sees the patient, when she's sitting there in the dark in the kitchen drinking the wine, and it's just barely there. The visage of her patient with the smile on, and you're wondering, wait, is it there? Is she just kind of seeing some sort of, like, it's like a PTSD echo? It was so good, because it would have been one thing to just have the girl in her kitchen, and that would have been scary, and she would have had a much different reaction. Again, going back to the way that she played it, but that's not what made her drop her glass, right? It was A-Train coming in that is what got her and made her drop the glass. And so because she was in that same headspace of like, ooh, yeah, this is really sticking with me from today. And so you've got the stuff like that. You've got the idea that something that hits home for so many people, this idea of just unresolved trauma, right? We're all around the same age, and it's like, it's kind of this general consensus that we're finally into this era where it's okay to openly discuss these things and to understand that trauma exists in varying levels and that everybody has different types from different things. And so it becomes very topical there, and it addresses something that's very real for so many people. And so you get that kind of that real life horror, you get the jump scares, you get the tension. I like to think that just kind of when he sat down, when Parker Finn sat down and decided to make this movie, he went with the, just that gumbo approach that we've talked about. And it's like, I want to make something scary. And so I think that it's purposefully hard to slap just one of these labels on this movie, except for just calling it scary. And I'm okay with that.
Right. One of the films, I know that it's not a good idea to have a metric or a measure. One of my favorite psychological thrillers is Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah. Hell yes.
Okay, so
again, a movie where you never know what's actually happening.
Exactly. So when I'm sitting here watching this and I'm thinking, okay, this is a psychological thriller. Okay, Jacob's Ladder. Let's see how it measures up. But then it throws that horror twist into it. It's like, all right, it's not better, but it's good.
Right.
So.
And I think that's okay. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so okay with the jump scare and the use of the jump scare in this movie is because I don't really think of them as jump scares. The jump scare for me is one that comes completely out of nowhere, and it's cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when a movie relies on jump scares, it's cheap.
Right.
Mm-hmm. But it that's not to say that it isn't an effective method of scaring you. It's just after the fact, nothing sticks with you if that's what you used as a crutch to scare. Mm-hmm. And this movie doesn't. So I don't really consider it jump scares, because even taken on their own, there's always a setup for them. There's tension that starts building from the moment that scene starts. And I go back to that scene with Dr. Northrup when she's walked into her house and there she is. That's when the tension starts, right? Because we've just come down from the scene before, and now it's starting to ramp, right? Where's A-Train? Did he let you in?
Right.
Why are you here? And then Northup keeps coming at her, and she's like, I don't like the way that and she keeps doing the therapist thing, right? And so how does that make you feel thing, until the phone rings. And then when the phone rings is when you realize there's a world outside of these two. So who's on the phone? And then there's a couple of seconds when you're like, it's her on the phone, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But you don't know. And your mind keeps telling you, no, that's her there. But you're like, the other mind, the lizard brain is like, nah, the fuck it ain't. And so it's more than just a jump scare. It's not just the camera pans and there she is with the smile coming on her face, mm-hmm. right? It's more than just the camera pans and there's Laura, bathed in darkness in the kitchen. It's more than just there's the mom. It's more than just there's the sister's neck. Everything was led up to, so it's not cheap. In fact, he's leading you right to it.
Right.
He hopes that you drink from the water that he's led you to. Right? Except just like Marissa Tomei says in My Cousin Vinny, bam. A bullet hits you in the forehead. do you give a fuck what kind of pants the son of a bitch who shot you was wearing? No, I don't care. I don't care that it was a jump scare. I don't care that you shot me in the fucking head while I was drinking from the water you led me to. What I care is about all the shit that happened before. And that's the stuff that really sticks with me. It's not the jump scares, because jump scares, again, are cheap. But if the rest of it sticks with me, man, that's really fucking effective. And that's really scary. And that's atmospheric. And that's what sticks with you.
Man,
and so it makes the jump scare mean something.
And there's that moment when she's staring, when she answers the phone from the security company. And you know, give us the password. Oh yeah, no, I'm Rose, Acapulco, whatever. And then the voice is like, "Are you sure you're in there alone? Look behind you."
Right.
That choice by Finn to not show us what was behind her, if anything was there.
Now we can't trust anything.
Well, and like I just got chills.
Yeah.
Like just remembering that moment, because you're just sitting there, because that's one of the ones. That's one of the ones where you're like, oh God, here comes you're waiting for that slow pan, because the camera's behind her, just staring at that bun in her hair.
And it's like, oh, it's POV. I know
exactly.
Yeah.
Or you're just waiting for that slow pan where you get just the face over her shoulder or something, and then the phone rings again, and you're out of that moment. It's like, oh God, like again,
I can breathe.
Yes, and you just you never know. Like I don't know what was behind her. Why did neither of us look? You know, I want. Did you want to look? I don't know. Like that type of stuff.
If I look, then it's there.
Yeah, that anti-jump scare, right? Yeah, it's the Schrodinger's cat of what's behind you.
Right.
I think so. And so like that anti-jump scare, the build, and then you don't get it. You're just yeah. Oh, so
no,
good.
gosh, I think that this is an important conversation, because the critics that we shouldn't listen to in the first place, their biggest issue was with what they believed was the cheap jump scare, you know, which to me, there was really only one, but all the other ones, you know, stemmed from something that was absolutely necessary, you know, and you're absolutely right.
But yeah, I mean, to say that the movie relies on jump scares is to ignore the movie, because I mean it's like 80% of this movie is tension. You know, like I said, I couldn't get comfortable. I was in bed. I was laying down. I'm comfy as fuck, right? and like I didn't even reach over to have a sip of water the entire time that I was in bed. You know, I barely picked up my phone.
Yeah.
I think I got a text message. I texted Daniel, like, hey, is this the movie we're supposed to watch? And I kept fucking watching. Like that's how utterly engrossed in this movie I was. And yeah, it was partly because of the story, but it was the other part was how fucking scary it was.
And so as we talk about just why this movie's so scary, we talk about these labels to put on it. There's one more label that we need to kind of acknowledge, and it's that last character that we just barely finally see. It's that idea of, is this a monster movie even? And so in a section that we're calling The Entity, I mean, we need to talk about it, right? The entity, what the driving force behind all of this is, this idea that there is a darkness, a spirit, an evil, whatever you want to call it out there, that's so dark that it thrives on trauma. How does that work for you as a movie monster, as an antagonist, Andy?
At first I wasn't too keen on the CGI, you know, but I mean, you needed to see something, you know. I sort of had a small issue with it when it was lit on fire and it was burning, it seemed a little campy to me.
Little bit, I will give you that. The flame effects, yeah.
But at the very end of the film, when that mouth goes wide open and he starts crawling in, you're saying, fucking A, what a great job.
Yeah.
That was perfect. And it made all of it just absolutely perfect for that. I had a small issue with the CGI, but it needed to go somewhere. And then I took that and I put it at the beginning of the film. I put that entity and I put it at the beginning of the film because that's what we should have been seeing. But obviously, we're not seeing anything. But now I do, you know. But that scene right there, when he just crawled into that mouth, I'm saying, you know what? Good job.
Yeah,
absolutely good job,
Dave.
If it makes you feel any better, Andy, there's very little CGI. In some of the special features that I saw for the movie, they built the fucking monster.
Really?
And it took like 2 or 3 people to puppet the thing.
Oh
wow, it's gigantic.
Was it like stop action?
No, it wasn't stop motion. So it's really interesting. It's all just camera tricks.
Wow.
So like sharp focus on it when it's up close, when you're looking at like the face with the multiple smile mouths, which I thought was really
that was
fucking
great.
scary.
That was great.
Right?
Yeah.
And for all the derivative qualities that this movie has, that's a really unique looking monster.
Yeah.
It was something that at once reminded me of the kind of thing you'd see in a Sam Raimi Evil Dead movie, right? Which we're also in a cabin in the woods at the end.
Right,
that wasn't lost on me.
Yeah.
But at the same time is totally unique and totally new. And that evil grin that was on its face, man, that sticks with you. It really does. And so to see that they actually built this thing, and they built a puppet of Rose that had like a stretchy mouth.
Right.
And so when Kyle Gallner comes in and he sees it going in, it's literally just soft focus. They open up the aperture on that camera so you get really shallow depth of field. You see Kyle Gallner in, full, focus, and then it's just soft focus in the background. And it's brilliant. And I'm sure there is some CG that went into kind of meshing things and making sure that everything was nice and smooth. But for me, that was another one of the things that I really loved about this movie. The fact that everything that we saw on screen happened in camera. When you can capture something in frame, it looks better.
Yeah.
To me, that was one of the things that I really liked. I questioned as I was watching it, I was like, are they building this thing and is it there? Or did they CGI it?
Yeah, I had a moment where I was genuinely wondering. I was just like, did they just go find like some Guinness World Record holder like to like climb through like this doorway and stuff like that?
And the thing is, I think that every iteration of the entity was scary. Whether it was Laura at the beginning of the movie, when we see her stand there with the smile on her face and we see the broken, shard of the potted plant in her hand, I was scared. When we see every other version of her, I was scared.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I know one of the things that he could have gone, you could have easily CGI'd those smiles. But they were genuine smiles. I read that they for days they were practicing. You need deadpan eyes, look a little maniacal and just smile. And then what they did was, I think I don't know if it was an Atlanta Braves baseball game.
Yeah, they did it at a Braves baseball game and Good Morning America.
Yeah, and they just stood behind there and they just stood there with their smile. Absolutely, So that shows a perfect connection. I was convinced that it was CGI. I'm sorry.
And I understand why, because it looks so good, but even the the monster mother, right? The version of her mother that she remembers from her childhood, which I thought was brilliant to use that as like that stopgap between the mom, the original monster, and the new monster. Right, the ignoring of the original trauma creates this thing, and here's this thing in the middle that is that isn't both things. That wasn't CGI either. That was a dude in makeup, and they just by building a miniature set, they make it look like the mother from Barbarian. something that is just grotesque and gigantic, and yet it isn't. So it's all like old school camera tricks that really work.
Daniel, this isn't the first time that he debunked CGI to me. I mean, Indiana Jones 4, I was convinced, totally convinced that scene where they're in the Jeeps going through the jungle, dude, there's no way. There's no way. And then, son of a bitch, he's absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I look at the entity and you look at just everything that's encompassing, that it encompasses, I think that what we get out of this is something that we look back on some other movies that we've done here recently, and we see it done better. When we did Antebellum, and we kept talking about how the whole idea of this is that the horror of this is in fact that slavery is horrific. But one of our problems was, we needed an antagonist who was the face of slavery. And while we got a couple of guys that were just kind of douchebags, we never got that. But what we get here is the idea is that trauma is horrific. And then they managed to create a physical form that I was 100% on board with representing trauma. And so they took this ethereal idea of a horror and trauma, and then they gave me something physical to look at and to be scared of. And I think that was incredible for the ending. But honestly, I think that the entity is at its scariest all of those times when we can't see it. We talk on this show every once in a while about, things that are just very personally scary to us. And we've had that conversation about, well, what movies would we do if we're doing one that just really terrifies you to your core? And I'm always like, oh, well, we should do Arachnophobia sometime. Because I'm terrified of spiders. But then I see a movie like this where you see someone whose entire identity is crumbling around them because of something that could possibly only be happening in their head. And that got me so hard. Just this idea that you could work to have, she had the hot fiance, she had the hot shot job, they're driving nice cars. That house was baller.
Oh yeah.
She had it all. And watched in the matter of 4 days while she lost it all, while also not being sure if the driving force behind her losing it was real, or if her imposter syndrome that she had been working 80-hour weeks to overcome had finally caught up with her, and she could no longer fake it till she made it. And now the walls that she's built around her in this professional and personal life to protect what is at its core still a very damaged little girl who found her mother dead. Those walls are crumbling, and she can't prove to anybody that there's any reason for it. And that part of the entity, the idea of breaking someone down until they just give up. And that's what we finally get in that last scene. It's not that it finally just overpowers her and rips her mouth open and climbs inside. It finally breaks her wholly, completely, until all that's left is to just accept the entity. It's that same thing that makes so many possession movies horrifying. It's the same thing that makes all of these things that go into movies when you're dealing with, some sort of poltergeist or some sort of devil. The thing about those that becomes so horribly and freakishly scary is just the idea that there is something that lives only to break you until you give yourself to it. and then you become a willing host. That is horrifying. And it was just so good. And the idea of never actually showing us the entity until the very end was very smart, because you got to spend the whole movie, because the girl, Laura, at the beginning said, it's like it wears other people as a mask. So as you're seeing all of these other times that the entity is around looking like someone else, you realize that you still don't know what it looks like. And that is scary. So I think the entity just became this amazing movie monster, not just because of everything that went into when we actually saw it, but everything that went into making it scary all those times when we couldn't actually see it.
It was horror edging. You know,
Oh my God, it was.
It was just that delayed gratification of, you know, I had resigned myself to not seeing a monster. I was okay with it. I was okay with this movie believing that it was just something, right?
Yeah.
That you would. I was just looking at it. When I was looking at this person, I was looking at the monster.
Yeah.
When I was looking at this thing, I was looking at the monster. When I was looking at nothing, I was looking at the monster. I was okay with that. I was like, yeah, it's very you know, ethereal, and that's all right.
So you would have been
the
okay.
payoff was there.
You would have been okay with like basically her doing the same thing that we saw at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
Without the monster, and that would have been perfect. I got you.
I would, yeah, and that's what I thought I was going to get. By the end of the movie, I thought that's what I was going to get. So by the time that we saw Monster Mom, I was like, oh fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then we see it, and I'm like, shit. What more could I ask for?
Right. So, I mean, that takes us to the end, right? We are riding up on that 90-minute mark, which means it is time for us to rate this thing. So we always like to remind everybody at this point in the show, when we talk about a movie, we do compare it to other things. But when we rate a movie, we are only looking at it against itself. So for every movie, we create a unique rating system, something that only exists for this movie, so that we are only talking about Smile as it exists right now. Andy, whenever we have a guest on, we always like to give you the option. I know that this was kind of a last-minute thing. Were you able to come up with anything? What are we rating this out of?
About bloody smiley bacon strips?
Ooh, I like that.
I do too. All right. So, Andy, out of a possible 5, bloody bacon, bloody smiley bacon
bloody
strips. Smiley bacon strips.
You know, you get the sunny side ups and the smile. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So
what do you give Smile?
I got to give it a 4.5. I got to tell you that if I see it again, I'll probably rate it higher. I don't think it could go the full 5 yet, but again, it's something that even at the beginning I was considering a 4. But just listening to David, you know, sort of like, you know, it grew on me a little bit, and it was sort of therapeutic in a way.
Hey.
So the reality is that from a 4 to a 4.5, that's what I'm going to get. A 4.5 bloody smiley bacon strips.
All right, Dave.
I'm really glad that Andy repeated bloody smiley bacon strips, because I had forgotten already. But really, it is the perfect metric for this movie. I'm also going to give it 4.5 bloody smiley bacon strips. The movie's fantastic and the movie is great, but I had to come up with what the ending meant for me to not hate the ending.
Right.
Because to me, it has that ability to be too dark. Which I know we're talking about a horror movie, but because the content is so dark and because it's about something that affects everyone, because we all have trauma that we deal with, I would hate if the message actually is, don't bother dealing with your trauma because you're going to fucking die from your trauma.
Right.
So it's because I'm still uncertain about what that possibly might be. And I know that that's probably what Finn was going for, or I think that's what he was going for. But because I don't know, I'm gonna go 4.5. And like Andy, this movie, like it begs to be rewatched and reanalyzed and reassessed. I can't wait to watch this again and see how I feel later. So just like Andy, if you ask me in a couple of months, this might be a 5, or it might be a 2.5. Who knows?
Who knows? Look, I'm right there with you guys. I mean, 4.5 bloody smiley bacon strips, right? Like I said, I do want to knock it, and I know that it is not I know that the filmmaker doesn't necessarily make the trailer. There are companies who do that. I was a little disappointed in that being revealed in the trailer, even though it did still get me that one jump scare. But I think that when I look at the fact that, like you said, Dave, you were afraid to go downstairs. When I looked at the fact that I was not comfortable going to bed when this movie was over, I was already in that 4 boat. I was right there. When you watch as many of these movies as we do, and something comes out and still puts you in that place, that's awesome. Yeah. We didn't even talk about just the some of the directorial decisions from Finn here, and some of the ways you talked about him being great behind the camera. Some of those slow pans that we got that revealed nothing, while others revealed very horrifying things. I think that on a rewatch, there's a fun game to play in this where you just take a drink every time you see a smiley face on something. I think that there's a very fun game to be had in that. There's one on her coffee cup at one point. There's a couple times there's posters around. Yeah. There's a lot of fun little stuff, to pick out smiley faces that are just pocketed throughout this movie.
And colors. There's a lot of yellow. The color yellow always kind of prefaces something happening.
And so I think that this movie is absolutely worthy of a rewatch. I think this is one that I'm going to highly recommend to people, especially if they're just like, well, what's something that's just really scary? Yeah, here it is. Right. Mm-hmm. This movie will keep you up, and it will keep you questioning. Like we've said, though, it is not perfect. It's not a first at bat home run, but I mean, it's a triple where he thought about going, right. It was a very, very good movie. And man, I'm hyped for the career that Finn could have in front of him if this is how he's coming out of the gate swinging. So yeah, I mean, across the board, that's 4.5 bloody smiley bacon strips here on Shiver.
And it's kind of hard to beat that for a directorial debut. Mm-hmm. So fucking hats off to Parker Finn there. So if you stuck with us the whole time, thank you for sticking with us. If you didn't, come back.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, we like you, or so we say, so that we can continue to get your downloads. No, we do.
Yeah, we really do. And we do love communicating with all of you guys. So make sure you head to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. All of those things at ShiverPod. So make sure you head out there. You find us. We do a lot of our communication through Instagram. We do have one more live comment here from Greg, who says he's going to get us that list. Top of the list, American Werewolf in London.
Which we haven't done.
We have not done yet. And Greg, it does seem just spectacular taste. Can't wait to see the rest of that list. Make sure you head to shiverpod.com. Find us on all those things. Follow us all over the place. I try to have a lot of fun with the Instagram. Drop some memes every once in a while. Always let you know what's coming up. We have got another brand new to us movie next week. As next week we will be doing the movie Megan.
Yeah, excited for that one.
I'm very excited for that one. I've heard there's a lot of campy fun, and that one's going to be the opposite of this one, from what I've heard.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. At least for now. I haven't seen it, so don't quote me on
for right now. I kind of need that. Like I need next week's to be one that I can enjoy to that level. So make sure you follow us on all of that out there. We really appreciate everybody who listens. If you do listen on a regular basis, drop us a review, 5-star rating, whatever you think we're worthy of. And of course, you can always email us at shiverpod@gmail.com.
There you go. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.